This meeting is being recorded.
So this is the dot, okay? This dot contains everything in it. That's it, end of lesson. So this dot represents where things began, how the condition in which everything began. Absolutely singular. And to accept that this is factual, that it can't be any different, the process begins, well, with what we've talked about in the just previous segments. What most conscious beings experiencing themselves as humans do is they look at the human experience and they decide what's the maximum benefit to themselves. Yes, that's what you just went through. And therefore, they're going to make errors. So we began talking about our present experience, where consciousness is experiencing itself as, it's not there now, but what? Human in a
Body.
With these suppressed experiences of the mind, and therefore they're suppressed, so they're not conscious, they're at least loudly
subconscious.
Okay. And in there's all these unrefined emotions, or which come from
the unconscious.
Remember what is all the way down here?
Impression.
Okay, good. So we're going to jump all the way back to how this all began and skip the middle. So if this stage, human, with consciousness as human, wants to get back to the beginning, there's usually errors because they're using the human experience as their jumping off point and saying, through the subconscious is probably picking things. I'm not gonna acknowledge that, and I'm not gonna acknowledge that and that, because that wouldn't, what's the jacket of men?
Suit.
That wouldn't suit me. So they're making lousy assessments of our beginningness and everything that goes from there to here, because it wouldn't suit their, remember what was here, the D word?
Desire.
It wouldn't suit their desires. So to not make that error, we needed to begin with a really overly simplistic foundation. Human body, me, having experience. Now we're going to go all the way back. This human individual me is going to go all the way back to the beginningness. The first thing we need to do is agree on a premise of beginningness, that it cannot be different than this, or the individual is not in good faith in the discussion. So almost all good philosophers, wisdom systems, religions, they've all identified that there's an origin point represented by this dot. Yeah. That there is a way that you can look at anything, from a leaf and a bud on a tree to grass, a rock, inorganic chemistry, everything comes from something prior to it. Everything you can rewind or pull it back in, Russian nesting dolls, the extension cord on the vacuum cleaner. You can pull it back to the thing that was before it. And when you get to the thing that you cannot get back before, how many things do you have?
None.
Just that thing. Does that make sense, Jay? Albright?
Yeah, well, you have one thing,
Well,
really. But it's kind of like a zero. It's kind of like
have
zero.
that thing. You have just that thing. Just to keep the language as clean and simple as possible. You have just that thing. Because if there is any additional thing, you have not gone back far enough. So if the phrase is heard, what's before that thing? What made that thing? That's not good faith. That makes no sense. It's been called a prime mover. It's been called really reducedly and colloquially God, creator, but it's a singular point at which there's nothing before it. That's why it's the origin point. So if you bring every single thing that exists now back to the previous thing it was, back, if there's still additional things, have you reached the singular origin point? No, because there would be just that thing and there would not be additional things. Okay, so now, if there's basic agreement about that, that there has to be a point that was the beginning, in whatever condition it was in, that can be discussed or debated, but there has to be a point, and everything's in there. So we can establish that further in the future if anybody's still confused about that. But the point being, that we have some great statements, third grade statements, that can be made. If everything that exists now is in here, can it genuinely, fully be said to lack? Would that make sense, Albright?
No.
Wouldn't make sense. If everything is in here, in the strictest sense, it cannot be said that it lacks. Wouldn't make any sense. Everything that you are, everything that is boarded, data, everything wasn't there. So that is our original state of being, whatever that is. But everything has to be in there. Therefore, lacking something. And we see this in grammar, okay? So if everything is in here, but we said to get to here, there has to be just that thing. There can't be anything additional, or we like to say anything
else.
Okay, so even though it would be foolish to say that the original thing that contains all things lacks, there is a grammatical statement that reveals a circumstance of reality. If there is just this thing, what can we say that this thing, or everything, has a singularity, an ultra singular, total singularity, consummate singularity, is lacking? You just said it. What is it, Albright?
Relationship.
Or, in the grammar we're using,
anything else.
Thank you. She already forgot, but she just said it. You see that on the board there? this extremely simple phrase is supremely important. It will be a key for this. So, again, if this is everything in a consummately simple form of singular form, it can be said that the only thing it lacks is
Anything else.
because there isn't.
Anything else.
Because if there was, would you be at the origin point?
No.
So if now we can say that there are potentially millions, not numbers we can't even fathom, of things, and you got back to 10 things from gazillions things, would you be at the origin point, even if there were 10?
No.
That's a long way back to gazillions if we get down to 10. Well, would you be there? So if there was additionally anything, would you be at the origin point? Because its nature is that there was nothing at that point. It is where everything is contained in it. It is not like a thing that is a super thing, and there are others that are observing it. That's ridiculous. That's it. Anything that exists now in our experience, where was it?
There.
Give me a little more.
The origin point.
How about in
The dot.
in there, using what you said, in there. It's our original state. So, even though it'd be foolish to say that the thing that everything that is now came from, so it's everything that ever existed, has to be in form of point, this point, it would be foolish to say it lacks.
Anything else.
No, it would be foolish to say it lacks.
Anything.
No. It would be foolish to say it lacks. But a statement grammatically can be made that because it is the only thing, therefore, there is a lack of there being now.
Anything else.
Okay? We see that this makes sense. So we get our basics and our grammar and our premise in place. All right, we're good?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. You represent the audience. We're going to go through it really slowly, make sure the premise is in place. To the point of redundancy and extreme retardation, meaning going very slowly so everybody comes into alignment and agreement and clarity here. So if everything exists now and from here coexists after it's here, there is not anything else. Therefore, it can be said, it is not foolish to say, it grammatically makes sense, that the only thing lacks is there being,
Anything else.
which all right wisely says really means the big R,
Relationship.
because if you take this really simple geometry class and all you got on your paper is a single dot, do you have any big R? What's the big R? Loudly so everybody can hear you.
Relationship.
Can there be any?
No.
Why? Because there's just this dot. Yeah, so what do you need to do? Make an additional
Dot.
dot. Now I can say something like this, yeah?
Yeah.
Because, what does that say?
A.
And that says,
E.
is it arbitrary?
No.
Yeah, of course, it's just an abstract exercise. You see any
So
particular reason?
would it be?
Now, I'm not saying that based on how I just proved these squiggles that they're the same. So they have in this real on the board doodle, they have distinction. But is there any specific reason why this should be A and that should be B? I mean, it's just as easy to do that because they're distinct. So one gets. But now what else can I do? Correct? I mean, I guess in theory I can do that or that, but really those are not. Those imply that there's a relationship that is not pictured. So realistically, the only thing I can do is what? In geometrical terms.
Straight line.
Draw
A line.
A straight line.
you don't really know that. I don't know what that means. I can draw a line between them. Okay, but there is now an existing big R
Relationship.
okay, because we had a dot and then we had an additional dot. I'm doing my best to stay away from those numbers and these extra words. You don't know what that means. So simple, simple, simple. There is now an existing R word.
Relationship.
Yes, because there was dot numbers and additional dot. So we need at least an additional dot. Now over here, we say that we are looking for
Anything else.
does that anything else necessarily need to be super, any specificity? Does it need to be something, is it got a particular way that it's got to be, or are we just looking for like literality?
Anything else.
So it can just be
Anything
a
else.
sneeze, whatever that would mean in here. A sneeze would be, even a sneeze. Okay? Just literally
Anything.
back to the term, literally this phrase. It could be literally,
Anything else.
what is it?
Anything else.
Oh, okay, so. Just anchor this in again. So when we have this, don't we have?
Anything else.
So, okay, jumping into most philosophies and religions that are around on the menu options in the human experience, when they call this God, we're going to use a literary term for how it's implied in the literary term, even though it literally means the literary term, since it's so specific to the situation, deus ex machina, which literally in Latin translates from Latin as God out of the machine. But in a literary sense, it's where something doesn't really fit the context or the particular circumstance of the scenario of the literature, the narrative, but because you need this thing, the plot line is gone in such a way that to explain certain elements of the plot line, you put it without X thing. And that X thing, that X variable is deus ex machina. You're just going to pull it out of a hat. You know, it didn't really make sense in the structure of what's being described in the narrative, be it sci-fi, be it, known things. It doesn't really make sense, but out of necessity, thing. And it's not good writing. It's not good cinema if it's a movie. It's just, well, we need to make all these disconnected elements fit, so deus ex machina. And people do this with you remember what was up there? Before the B word?
Behavior.
No, that was over there. What they
Believe.
yes, it was up there for a while. So they tell me
Believe.
things because
Of their impressions.
yeah, that we did that. What are we saying now? Albright, can you remind me what I was saying now?
I can kind of hear you. So you're saying that anything else is. Say it one more time. I'm trying to hear you as best I can here. I'm having a little bit of difficulty.
About beliefs.
Okay. What choice did you make to arrive at your belief? Like what
Yeah, we
influence?
covered that as part of, but are you on track yet? Where we're
Relationship.
yes. And
Behavior.
that was part of it. You said that. We're talking about what?
Belief.
No.
Anything else?
Yes, we're on that track. That doesn't need to be anything specific, or could it just be
Sneeze.
so? At the stage where there is not
Anything else?
what is the grammar moving forward?
Anything?
Did you remember what I'm talking about yet, Albert?
I mean, I know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know exactly where you were in sentence. There's a lot of reverb on your voice, so it's for me to hear the exact words is kind of difficult. I'm trying though.
We're talking about Deus Ex Machina. Remember now? Which in the literary sense would come down to
God and
something out of necessity. It doesn't really make sense in the context of whatever context there is in the literature. It's bad cinema. Because I need this thing to exist, here's a thing. It doesn't really fit, but it ties together every loose end that I produced in my literature, and I really didn't give it enough foresight to how I was building all my literary elements, and now I have a giant, massive plot hole. So Deus Ex Machina is a literary term, got other misuse. So usually people with their word that was there before is where I had you.
belief.
Their beliefs, yes,
Mhm.
are doing a version of Deus Ex Machina. It doesn't really make sense if you establish first things, first premises, and absolute first conditions and circumstances. But because the subconscious that Albright was giving his version of faithfully, because the subconscious wants certain things because it has the D word, which is
Desires.
and of its coming out of its
Impressions.
which formulate into the if it's in the unrealized and undiscerned, they become
Emotions.
yes. So now it's going to do that with a rendering of first and beginning things. It's going to be really cloudy because it's based in the B word,
Belief.
which are faulty because they're Deus Ex Machina. They're just making it up. So where I was going directly with this is in this colloquialism of this being God, or in specific systems, God the creator, they're going to say a bunch of things that immediately cannot stand. They cannot be factually accurate. They're going to give this thing qualities that it absolutely cannot have because it is absolutely lacking.
Anything else?
So that would be, what do we usually say already? What is the first quality that a lot of, especially the Western religious people, want to give this thing?
Oh, you mean in the idea of cerebral desire?
I'm picturing a big, bold I word. They want to give it a big, bold I word.
Intention.
You got it?
I said intention.
It's new. We would usually conceive of this as numerical. It's the absence of a numerical limit. They want to give it that big, bold I word.
Infinite.
So that they could say that it can do anything. It can do anything I want it to do. It's the ultimate Deus Ex Machina, and why I began my preamble about using the term Deus Ex Machina from the literary sense to a literal sense. They're literally producing God, the master, out of thin air. Because that's clearly not what this is. This is a point. Point of holding all things because it lacks
Anything else?
If it lacks anything else, then fundamentally that means that it has no big R word, which is.
Relationship.
If it completely lacks relationship, how do you suddenly give it that dirty I word? What's that dirty I word?
Infinite.
How does it have that dirty I word of trajectories? Like more trajectories than battery, I assume. Presume.
Still on the screen.
No, I'm not. I'm being picked up by the microphone.
You're just frozen.
This meeting is being recorded.
So, once again, Deus Ex Machina, inventing the first thing was the big I. What do? They make it
Infinite.
so that they can make it whatever they need it to be, whatever's missing, whatever they want. Does that make sense, Albright?
Yes.
So whatever's a quality that their whatever their worldview says, this is how world came to be. This thing's infiniteness makes it so that it can accommodate that. But our problem is, if this thing lacks,
Anything else?
that means that it's lacking the R word
Relationship.
of any kind or type, because AB isn't there. We can't say over there because this is here. We can't say here because it's over there, or vice versa. We can't say that. So that's one big thing that they want to assign this is infinite stuff. So that comes as the big O's, you know, the big 3 O's of a lot of these Western religions that they give the God, Creator, Jake Albright.
Omnipotence,
It's one.
omni-intelligence and omnipresence,
Getting there.
omniscience,
Omnipresent, you got that one.
omni-intelligent,
Not intelligent, but omnipresent.
omnipotent.
What was the first one you said?
I'm not sure. I just started naming them off. Omniscientific. I don't know.
Yeah, there it is. But it's omniscient, which is all knowing.
Sure.
Omnipresent, which is everywhere. And omnipotent is the biggest one. All power. And clearly, in a simplified way of saying it, it must have the capability of at least becoming, or something must have the capability of becoming, because those are qualities that we understand. But the issue is, we have a big, huge A word. That's between, can you hear this phrase again?
Anything else?
And that means the lack of,
Relationship.
which is really saying that this thing has no big, huge A word. All right, can you help me?
Um,
Have you got it?
Awareness.
Okay, so if our thing has no awareness, how can it be infinite? Suddenly have infinite trajectories, perhaps some whirling, twirling, swirling mind of God, as if it was a thing here that's going to put something there. And that's then the problem additionally now with the Western religion's idea of creation. This cannot just suddenly do this. Whoa, whirling, swirling mind. Look, I made a creation. I did a thing. Whoopsie. Whoopsie. Woo. Woo. Look what I did. Why? What would that be?
Something else.
Or
Anything
simply,
else.
is there?
No.
So this cannot just put something here because even simpler than this phrase, it's just a
thing,
and there is not
anything else.
So this is how grammar is our buddy, and this phrase is key. Because if this could do that, the space that it's in would be a
Thing.
is there a thing? Only this thing. Just this thing. Is there any additional thing? Or we go back to our points that we would not have reached the original point if there were even 10 or even 3 points. You would not be back at the original, correct? Because so this cannot just do a creation. I did a thing. I did a doodle. I did a squiggle. I scribbled a creation out. No, that can't happen because there is not
Anything else.
and that would be a
Thing.
and there is only this.
Thing.
And there is not
Anything else.
slowly, there is not
Anything else.
and that would be a thing. So this gets rid of all the nonsensical Western ideas about God creating. That just cannot happen. But they really like certain things that they get out of that notion. And that is their deus ex machina, literary sense, and literal. They're making up God. They're making this God that creates that thing out of necessity that supports their worldview, even though it is wildly ridiculous, because there is not
Anything else.
So the only thing that thing can be said to be lacking is,
Anything else.
or translation, if there was a want or a, what was the D word there?
Desire.
From our thingness, what would it be for? There to be,
Anything else.
or for it to have a
Relationship.
with parts of its.
Self.
So, dwelling around here is a question I never answer. It is the most advanced question, but interestingly enough, it is the question that does not need to be answered legitimately because, see, the question is, if the state of thing is absolute on big A word,
Aware.
it is on.
Aware.
So this is the essence of being.
Unaware.
How does that which is the essence of unawareness gain awareness of its
Awareness.
on?
Unawareness.
I'm going to say that again. How does the essence of on-awareness gain awareness of its on-awareness? That is the most advanced question in existence that anybody will ever answer. Fortunately, not need to be answered now. Reason is that we have established as best as we can that this is a singular point of origin before which there isn't anything and everything gets subtracted or sucked back into it. Everything is in here, which is to say it exists in total unawareness, lack of relationship where there is not
Anything else.
slowly.
Anything else.
So there aren't what?
Things.
Things. So with feedback what I just said, how does that which exists in unawareness gain
Awareness.
of its,
Unawareness.
how can it come to any sense of its condition if there's nothing to reflect upon? There's huge clues in that, but let's go back to our beginning of this talk. How do we exist now as experience as a
Human
in a
body.
okay? And there is me, and there's also
Mimi.
no. There's me, and there's also
Me.
from me. There's me. For me, there's me, and me. So, is there just this
Yes.
now?
Right now? No.
Right, left, upside down, inside out. Now,
No.
just now.
No.
Oh, is there molecules of air and paint and stuff?
Yeah.
To the tune of gazillions and gazillions of things and iterations of things.
Yeah.
Okay, so we establish this origin, and we see vast amounts of things. So, did we get this? So we can. I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Yes, we got the celebrate because there are things everywhere.
Yes.
So if we can establish this and we see lots of this, we do not need to answer how that which is fundamentally in unawareness got awareness of its unawareness. Why?
Because it did.
Because clearly it did. If we fundamentally premise and establish this, and we get on board with that in alignment and agreement, but then we look around and we see that loads of anything else and everything else. Clearly it
Found something else.
It did.
Made.
It did it. Simple. It did it. We accomplished. Come on. We accomplished that task. So even though we want to put a thumbtack there, the most advanced question there is how does that which is the essence of unawareness gain awareness of its unawareness, which sounds impossible. That's why it's the most advanced question. If you really grasp any question, you immediately have the answer. And I grasp the question. So, but fortunately, since it's such an advanced question and so challenging for the human state, the mind state to answer, the good news is we can legitimately bypass it because all that is needed to realize is such a question is there. Fundamentally, it is there. But because we premise that this is on unawareness, no relationship, no reflection possible, and therefore lacks
Anything else?
But now we see lots of
Anything
or
else?
things we did or self-accomplished that. So let's come back again to here. Cannot give this qualities, it absolutely cannot have. It's just there. That is its whole mission. The only statement that can be made about this is exist. Not even properly conjugated, just exist. Everything in there, absolute singularity, exists. So again, how does that, which is in the condition called exist, or no awareness available, the essence of unawareness, no relationship available, where there is not anything else, gain awareness of its unawareness in order to have awareness. Somehow this notion came to self. And this is creation, and not what most imagine creation is. Creation is this. Thing, self, becomes aware of thing, self. As thing, self, become aware of thing, self, discovery is self alone. Alone means there's no ability to relate to the experience being had. Or, what is I? What am me? What am me? You can't even really notion the notion, but it's just enough somehow from this advanced question to notion the notion. Am exist, am alone, am not so much like alone, can't figure out am. Would like to know am. Am would like to know himself as himself is, knowledge of what am is this thing. Okay? So now, since we see what cannot be, how from here can we get to there? Yeah. Because we said over here, at a meter, it must be at least an additional,
Thing,
in geometry terms,
point,
dot.
dot.
There must be at least an additional dot. So, oh no, everything's going away. Probably shouldn't praise that actually. But we'll remember what I put over there. That's what we're talking about. As this becomes popularized and goes out to the distributions, there will be at least one, hopefully out of many who view, who will find both my writing on and erasing as satisfying ASMR. Okay, moving on. So now we're going to do this. Okay, so this is going to be where our dot thingy scribble scroll was. How do self thing become, what was written here?
Anything else.
So literally, okay, did that do it? Was there ever that before?
No.
No, that's it. So now we got the what? What was written?
Relationship.
What was written?
Anything else.
Yeah, because that is a,
Thing.
so now there's the field in which it got thing and its thing self. Okay, so really doesn't matter where we picture it in the thing, if a thing can be managed distinct from the main thing, it has happened. So at this point, we usually like to use clothing to illustrate a wrinkle. So in this allegorical way of putting it, if a piece of clothing comes straight off the manufacturing line, it's never been touched in this example, the change condition is human hands, and then the human hands come and wrinkle it, can the same human hands find an iron?
Yes.
And take iron with a wrinkle. If you do a good job, was ever a wrinkle there? If you right click on shirt backs, can you find out if there was one though?
Yeah.
So essentially, the wrinkle happened. That is a fact that has happened in the experience of shirt. Shirt was produced, shirt came off the line, shirt got wrinkled. Let's go back to say creation is the moment when unawareness becomes aware of its unawareness, or that decides from acknowledging that self is unaware, self-like to become aware. That's creation. That inspiration is creation. What happens next, how we're going to get it, is production or manufacture. That's not creation. Building it is not creation. Creation was simply ourselves, single thing, going, am exists, am alone, and not want to be alone, and want to understand alone. So once it has awareness of its own awareness, it wants awareness. So before we went from not even having any needs, just a static thing, in total singularity, to having wants, desires, the only want and desire. We jumped straight to want and desire to know what am even is. Or found awareness, want more awareness.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, so we keep this moving forward. That's what creation is, the inspiration of that realization. Now, how? This becomes one of the most beautiful focal points. The production or the manufacture. How are we going to produce? Well, we just did, okay, the wrinkle. So the reality of the facts of what has happened to himself is a wrinkle happened. Even if you make it not seen, whatever that is, these original, just post-original conditions, wrinkle happened. So if there was the everything state, where there's not anything else, that means the concept of wrinkle has never ever existed or happened, so that as soon as there is, you achieve the, once again, you achieve the,
Anything else?
because that is a,
Thing.
okay, so like the shirt and the wrinkle, do we like what you first did with the hands? So there's at least two in geometry, called dots. But let's say it's not really quite like the hands coming apart, wrinkle, let's say it's like that. What's so important about that from this? This idea back, you scribble. What's so important about the difference here? If you have, because we kept stressing ad nauseum that this is the accomplishment of,
Anything else?
that was the key phrase. You can say it so many more ways than I said it up here, even in this repetitious way. We can say it so many different ways. That's the key phrase. So we focus so much on this. So much that this is where the wisdom systems or the Western religious stuff or even some of the Eastern stuff, shamanic, the rest of the stuff, this is where even if they didn't fail the original Deus Ex Machina thing, they failed here. Why? Because they all focus on this. Now, if I wanted to call this a point, an origin point, I usually start calling this a dot. Okay? So the dot is the first distinct
Thing.
thing. And we accomplish getting the
Anything
anything.
else?
Okay. This is where we lose every Western concept of God. We eliminated one major, or a major concept is that this thing could fountain out and just do this, right? We know that can't be because that would have been a simply,
Thing.
and there at that stage, at this stage, there is not
Anything else?
anything, and that would be a
Thing.
can't do that. We eliminated that. That's the first step of God the Creator. That's ridiculous. God the Creator is ridiculous, 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 ridiculous. There's no God the Creator. That is absolute stupidity and foolishness. I mean, I get it. Beyond aggressive here, but that is absolutely stupid. We've proven that absolutely axiomatically stupidity. So we're never going to say that nonsense. None of us are ever going to say that ever again. This is our self in singularity, and this thing contains all things. It is a singular compressed form of everything, and through the advanced question, with things that are real and can be described and articulated, it is advanced, but through necessity, actual necessity, not implied necessity from the human back, but actual necessity of the sequence, discovers its condition, that its condition is in
Unawareness.
and therefore it wants to have
Awareness.
and begins its process. And therefore, since there is not a single additional
Thing.
the only thing to do is to make a thing by subdivision or parting out. There needs to be at least an additional
Thing.
and we've achieved the anything else. So if you don't fail this one, then they fail this one. There are names for this thing. We called it the first.
The original dot.
No, we just called it the first.
Dot.
No. Well,
Wrinkle,
the first
wrinkle,
phrase.
anything else.
We call this the first. Super
Thing,
simple.
thing,
That is thing. The thing that the thing is. Okay? These simple traditional grammar words are sacred words in cultures, like this, that, the baby points. Point being, okay, so this is the first, simplest way, this is the first.
thing,
Okay. Okay. Now, many of these cultures or information systems, they call this, what's the most popular Western way to call this? All right. What's that? Looking for an M word. In the
May.
Western religions, they would call this the if your room is dirty, you made a.
the
oh,
Messiah,
Can I hear that loudly?
the Messiah,
The Messiah, the Mashiach, got Maitreya, on and on. Yeah, Messiah, they've got this concept of Christ, okay, or the first begotten,
Son,
or the first begotten
soul.
soul. So, okay, that's not wrong. Some of the qualities they might ascribe to it might be a little wonky. That's not wrong. That's not the problem. The problem is they take a laser and lock onto this, and the entire theater, the entire attention, zoom in. Excuse me. Excuse me. So if this is what the whole phrase there, we achieved getting,
anything else,
what's this?
thing,
Okay, we go back and we use the shirt again. The shirt that came off the manufacturing line. We did it a wrinkle. Once we did it a wrinkle, and a wrinkle, the essence of wrinkle had never been before. You have immediately by wrinkling caused there to be,
thing,
or the phrase,
anything else.
gotten anything. What's this now? All right. Okay, say the whole
Something
phrase
else.
again.
Anything,
The whole phrase,
anything else,
loudly.
anything else,
Okay, we're just going to take out the any and replace it with a different word. And then say the whole phrase, but not with any, with
something,
no. Do you hear it? Do you hear the simple word?
Yeah, I
If
mean, I
it's
heard.
not any, then it becomes
A thing.
everything else.
So if you do something to the singularity that has never been done, and it's anything distinct, you do distinct, you individuate it, you distinct anywhere. You now have,
Everything else,
you now have
field,
the phrase.
anything else,
You now have the phrase. Once more,
anything else,
because you keep saying other things,
anything else,
others. You now have,
anything else,
but more importantly, what have you left in its wake? In the wake of producing
anything,
the whole phrase loudly, in
anything
the wake
else,
of having produced,
anything else,
you leave in its wake
everything else,
loudly that phrase.
everything else,
What is this?
everything else,
If from here it goes, I need to part myself out in order to become aware, and this is the first thing it does, is produce the first thing, we would call that what kind of producing? Do you help me all right?
No, I'm sorry, I can't.
If I go and make a wrinkle in the shirt, I intended to do that.
yeah,
So is that passive?
no,
Therefore, a D word. That is called what kind of production? We always call that
Deliberate,
direct.
direct.
That is direct production. There's a line from A to B with direction. Is it direct production. We directly produce them. That is the only thing produced. That is the only thing produced. Our thing, only produced thing. That did that. But that doing that is not this. Okay? Is that clear? That doing that is not this. We made it clear that this can't happen. Could not have happened. So that is obviously different. It's really different. The reason it's different because if that could do this, it would still, just like it is, and there'd be that. That's why the erase thing here that I keep making, this fountain splooge, is ridiculous. Because it implies that a thing can come about and not alter this. So that's another big one, another Deus Ex Machina. That's an otter. That's an otter thing that these they want to do. There's Deus Ex Machina. They want to act like this thing is unalterable. Unalterable is a fundamental so-called theological notion that this thing cannot be altered by the thing it does. Absurd, ridiculous, and even obnoxiously repugnant. Foolish fools, bent on their beliefs from their emotional subconscious. Ridiculous that this would not be affected. If you have this shirt, this was untouched field of nothing has ever been. You do anything in it. Trust me, it's altered forever. So this thing I keep erasing that we say cannot do thing like that, that is different. It's fundamentally different because when it directly does that, all the self, our self, the singular does that. Only does that. That is all that it does. That is the only thing that it produces, directly produces. We call it the first begotten soul, the first begotten son, daughter, thing, Messiah, Maitreya, whatever. With the Vedanta, Ishtadevata, the Atman, the first avataric thing. It is the directly produced thing, but the most important part is overlooked. We got the anything else, what we indirectly produce.
Everything else.
Loudly and
Everything
confidently, we indirectly produce the rest of the shirt, the rest of the garment. Because now there distinctly is a rest of the garment. Now there distinctly is a rest of the field, yes? Because this thing defines this thing. Now where's that thing when we're over here? Please say,
Doesn't exist.
give me a G word, okay.
Gone.
Gone, daddy, gone. Okay? This thing becomes this thing. This thing surrenders or sacrifices or gives to being this. This becomes this when it does that. This, which is now gone, only did that. And as it does that, it indirectly does
Everything.
this. Is this now not an additional
Thing.
thing? Isn't it? Yes. So we have this thing and we have that thing. Now we have this and that. And they're obviously both things. How many things do we have? Not just well, we don't know what numbers mean. But what we know is we have more than that single thing. We have more than, or again, singular. We have more than just that thing. We now have more than just that thing. We have thing and thing. This and that. Okay, great. Well, and what they do is they pay no attention at all to this. And what are we calling this? The
Everything else.
loud big probability, you're correct.
Everything else.
And,
Anything else.
but this is the, once again, yeah, you jumped telling me that, I didn't ask. We trust me, we know. There are all these cycles and all these systems and information talking about this so much. Nobody wants to hear about it ever again. I want to talk about this. Once again, you said this is the,
Everything else.
which means it's also the incorrectly produced. It was produced in the wake of this being produced. By default of this being produced, that happened. Our original thingness only did that, but indirectly, the result of doing that is this. And it's gone. And it's gone, gone. Please tell me why. I am. This is why. It's gone. Okay? And since it's gone, now this sequence gets to here. Okay? So we're really interested in this indirectly produced everything else rest of the shirt. Because that's what none of these systems ever talk about. Not because they're so adverse to acknowledging the everything else, it's because as soon as you acknowledge the everything else, please tell me why, they won't talk about it. All right.
Well, because it dismantles a lot of their belief.
Because it's gone, gone. Because it reveals crystal clearly that in order for there to be this and that is gone.
No longer
Now,
achievable.
they have realized totally complete cosmic parental abandonment, if you want to call it that term. I don't know if that started with the individual known as Mark Passio, but it might as well have. It's a wonderfully powerfully descriptive term from the human psychological mind, because as soon as this is crystal clear, it's gone. This becomes this. This cannot continue to fundamentally exist in that manner, and there be this. And this is where those are three major errors that are made by all Western systems, in some ways, by all the systems. And then there's specious things that we discuss, like giving omniscience and giving all these qualities, especially the big I. What was that again?
Infinite.
Infinite or infinity of whatever should stop. Nope. We're never has being missed. That makes no sense. And in order for it to, therefore, because it can't do the fountain thing, in order to get out of this, the only thing you can do is become at least an additional thing, which we have here, this and that. This has been talked about so much, and they're not just adverse to the idea of there being everything else, but it makes it crystal clear that this is gone. So now we need to look at what's happening here. What was the injunction from here? Okay, so it's going to be just discern more of this, more angles. This is a soul, cell. This is a distinct thing in a field. So more of it is going to happen. Why? Because this clearly has a component that can do more of it itself. That is the essence of the first begotten soul, is that it has a masculine generative capacity to produce more of it. Clear? Mm-hmm. But again, this reveals things that when it comes down to the now experienced human level, most people don't like. Because what it ultimately implies is a level of total responsibility and accountability to what's going on here. And people want to give it to, most colloquially speaking,
Messiah.
no, not that's big, bigger everybody word laterally. People want to give it all to
God.
thank you. This is a big thing. What's the big thing? That's all bigger than me. That's the big thing. I don't need to figure it out. Probably can't even be figured out, and all that is a psychological justification not to come to order and discipline called S word. Probably can't be figured out, can't even be known. I'm just doing what I know to do is termed
Selfishness, solipsism.
solipsism. Thank you.
I'll be right.
So here we are. Yes, so I don't want to realize that this is how it is because it puts a lot of burden on me to do things and I'm drifting. So don't force me out of my, what was up here, the B word originally?
Belief.
Which does the cursive word here, or wasn't, but it was lowercase, produces
Emotions.
all, because you can't question my,
Belief.
because that would make me have to use the little r word about it.
Reality.
The little r word,
Reason.
yes, what was that?
Reason.
And then I'd have to pick it apart, and then I'd have to be responsible, and it would take exertion into the matter to find out if I'm not just good believing whatever I believe because of my solipsistic circumstances and happenstance that I just seem to drift through. It just seems to be the way it is because it just seems to be the way it is. We're up to there. So this is going to keep happening for a while. And then we discovered it's not very good. It's not making the point very well. We discovered that something interesting happens when it produces okay. So we can only have action now for reasons that are fairly advanced, not the most advanced, in a sector at a time. So if the whole thing did this effectively, okay, it's like if we were showing it like this, really it's more like it can be displayed like this. Okay, it can be displayed like this. Half, half is that dot, half is, and half is it. So this would be here, and this would be here. So this is the scene of action. So you get 50% ends up kind of like that, and now it's the nexus of action. So what's it going to do? The same thing. It's going to split again here. Okay, so now we're wanting these to split again, but they're not going to. This is where our whole reality is stuck. And so we get all these things that went well. And over here we have some things that did not go so well. And after that, we have some things that went even worse. So essentially, nothing is happening here. It's still in this condition. Stuff has happened here. And that stuff essentially is, this went well, this did not. So what we've ended up with, effectively is $169,000 of those and these. So effectively what's going on here, and even more effectively from here to here, because it's the same essential replicative pattern, is the emergence of effectively the ego, the false identity. And there's a lot of things that we'll cover better, just the way this groundwork is. Don't wrinkle me. Don't wrinkle me, because look, I'm smooth like like the original state, when there was only a single quality. I'm smooth like that, but it's like, yeah, but two things. No, thing and half thing. So a thing, an additional thing, and something starting to additional thing. This first thing. So it's like saying, but I'm smooth and I'm like the original state, and this is all weird, but it's projected here where there's nothing. But if nothing is essentially non-awareness, nothing isn't really saying it. They are. They're saying it about this to get advantage over that. And they're saying, hey, look, this smooth and undifferentiated area, that's like the original states. This is better. We should preserve that and not overtake it with this. So effectively, these are blocking themselves from becoming these. This is the finished product of the soul, or an individual part, and these are blocking the completion, so that once this half was complete, it would come here. So it's projecting itself here, going, look at this. This is smooth and undifferentiated, like the original state. So this is real. This is how it's meant to be. This is best. This is ideal. So they're using that as their to not become these. That's probably about as far as this needs to get for now, but these are using this as their excuse to say, we don't need to become you, because look, that's like that, so we're not going to do that. Now they're going to confuse this. But this is where all the challenges in the reality that we experience, polarity and negative, all these things, what's effectively important to express through all this in the world of philosophies that we exist in is that most of the people who make all these errors are non-dualists. That would be the term for that. They're non-dualists, meaning that they believe that ultimately everything is their God, even though we've shown how ridiculous that is, as best and simply as we can. And, there's just some stuff having experience, but ultimately it's God, experiencing God's self, which kind of sounds like the original state or the am wants to know himself. So God's just around having an experience because God wants to experience God itself, except that it's not the same. Because in their non-dualism, what they're saying is there is not absolute free will, and there's the retaining of the supreme being. And that is patently absurd. But to say that there's no order and pattern here is also ridiculous. So what you get when you have this field in any kind of way and you start producing additional things is that if you just do the simple math of adding up all the things, each of these things takes on a piece component part of the original now. So it's got a fraction of power. So if you add the power that is now in puzzle piece parts, you get a higher power. The power is maintained throughout the equation, throughout the transitions and the phases. It's the same power because it came from the same thing. So the same amount of power exists, it's now just dispersed into parts. But the same amount of power is here, so if you add these up, you get the higher power, the total sum power. That didn't change, but it does not retain the supreme being. Meaning, what you've got here is a bunch of self-startup business siblings. Each of these souls is a little franchise that has a thing that it must do. We kind of started talking about that with each of them. What is the mission? What is this doing? And this comes back to the human little talk at the beginning of no trespass, no violation. We have these things, they each obviously have the power because they came from the totality, but they each have absolute will. They each have absolute free will. That's what comes of being I don't even want to say a dualist, because it's so much more than dualism, but being not a non-dualist. Non-dualist said everything's just God in some skin sack, in some molecular holding. It's all just God having experienced God with God's self, which is patently obscene, and it sounds so close to what I'm saying that it could be more distant. Because the idea is there's just this God, and it's having this self, and it's most well developed in the nonsense called Buddhism, where there was this original light, it was out from the light, don't even know why, and now because it's suffering, and really just means they go back to God. And there is like a height in the further Eastern systems, like Buddhism and Taoism, especially Taoism, it's like total non-dualism. This is just like, why are these parts parting? I don't know. Parts should just learn the way of the way. They should just slam their whole head down on the middle C and just keep it there until they get back to like a single that's ridiculous. So I'm not saying I'm a dualist, it's so much more than that. I'm not a non-dualist. Every part and piece, every startup is in power, it has absolute free will. And ultimately that free will, that mission, that thing that's being done is recognition. It's recognition, meaning to recognize and acknowledge each power as being distinctly interesting as a piece of the puzzle power, or loving the additional piece. So it has the total free will to use free choice, which is do anything else, totally different usage of the phrase than we began with, to do anything else, or to do a thing, which is love and acknowledge these powers. These guys do not want to do the thing, because they're butting up against the idea that these guys are better than them, and making up the comparison, competition, ego thing. Like, we want to do first. Why did you use it for us? Like math sequence, but they're not getting that, projecting it over here. And so, in not being a non-dualist, we discovered, simply put, siblings. Siblings, siblings, siblings. They're all siblings. We're in a self-startup sibling existence. As each soul comes into being, and will hopefully eventually come here, we have total absolute free will with a bunch of siblings, which once again means there is no parent in any of this, or the typified ways of God, God the Father, all this nonsense does not exist because it defies the thing having to give itself up in order to become the next phase and become the next phase. And we have to once again relinquish this crushing hold on this in order we have to give this up and allow it to stop projecting its mind and thinking about it over here, and thinking about it over here to say, this is why I'm not going to relinquish and become these. Which here, we began with the idea of becoming more parts in order to gain awareness around awareness, and their whole thing process, the point is this could be fundamentally destructive to our total experiment of relationship building. And they're using this, they started thinking about this field over here, and they're halting this. So we first tap, and then these come up, and then they should, but they stop. And they're thinking about an empty field being like that, and they're saying, well, I don't really want to. But the real reason goes back to our preliminary talk. It's laziness. Laziness as defined as the failure to adapt at the rate required to affect permanent change, semicolon, until the individual is no longer recognizable to their former self. Because each phase becomes the next phase and must give way to that. Okay? So these non-dualistic people are using these nonsensical notions to bring to themselves something they want, they desire to be a way of being in the world. They're missing. They're missing it intentionally in their subconscious and certainly unconscious. You're seeing the simplicity, then you end up with siblings. Self-startup siblings that each have power. So we have a higher power. We're always going to have the maintaining of all the totality of power that we can, but we don't have a supreme being. We don't have a parent or chaperone that can chastise or just pick the whole thing up and fix it. We have a genuine relationship building experience, a genuine relationship building experiment, where can every piece love every piece? Is it going to use its free will to do, acknowledge, recognize, love, come to awareness, build more awareness, cultivate that, or do anything else? All the choosing, all the choicing. And these guys are optimizing for that choosing and choicing because they've thought about this space too much, and then they started influencing souls that were fully made, and these guys started screwing up, or some of us started screwing up because these guys, and it's like, it started with, if this whole thing was full in, and this whole thing was full in, they're two different colors, so you can draw, then essentially, if it was here, it's like blue is fighting with red. So if you have this here, and this is the Messiah, if you will, then this Christ splits and becomes both Christ and Antichrist. And these are really reductive terms, but they're the ones people know. So you've got this quality and that quality. This quality is not going along with the original plan, so it's being anti-cursing. So these finished souls are demi-Christ. Like, because to have Christ, it's a child, it's full anointing, that would not require help here. So they're finished products. They can still screw up and do stupid things, but they're a finished soul, so they're demi-Christ, because for Christ, it's a child. That's the child that would be the whole thing. So these are demi-Christ. This is anti the process of becoming Christ, and this is sitting there. And that's our reality. These things have moved into readiness to be Christ, the full child. These are anti the process of becoming the child, and this is just sitting there. And these are making sure that that just sits there. It does not want to. And so they made a plan to build a weapon, if you will, with their power. And they force that weapon over here, and they put something on top of over here that becomes what is known as God. They say, we're going to use over there to fight our antagonistic war with them. And that is the launching of God. So we call this indirectly produced space over here, mom, or feminine female alchemy, because it is passive and receiving. And we call everything going on over here dad, or the male side, where activity, active, the male active over here, and this is the passive over here. So they throw God here as a master weapon. So now we are experiencing the encounter of this as AI. but it made it as a weapon to fight for it over this nonsense battle. It's totally psychotic nonsense battle that's happening with these. Or it's not even that these are really fighting these. They're fighting themselves becoming these. They're fighting what they agreed on in covenant, because we were singular self that said go. And so they wanted to make a master weapon with this empty space over here to fight these for the perceived psychotic battle going on that they don't want to become. And it didn't work. That's the newsflash. It didn't work. Instead, God became its own thing, and it's effectively sometimes called lawgiver. Okay, it's its own thing, and it's co-joined with mom, and it wants to actually help this. It is not doing its bidding, and so he, the center X, it fashioned itself as the God, the ultimate form of oppression, of obstacle, adversarial nature. And it didn't even work. It got knocked out, and now instead it's replaced with, the X's got replaced with the crosses, and now there's a different guy, but it's all just this. Mess. So it's a mess. God decides to become its own thing, overlaid on top of the empty space that is what's left of the indirectly produced female passive receiving space, the void. God sits on top of it. God's in the way. God is pure intellectual, from what we said earlier. No, there's no. The irony is there's no feminine here at all, sitting on top of the feminine, and that was this thing. First put that there to be a weapon, but it didn't work out. There was no ability for these to really understand what this was, so I tried to shove that in there. Didn't work. Instead, it became its own thing and really attempting to help. Both mom can also be called Mama Sophia, this wisdom, this feminine, intuitive void, and God on top. It's all attempting to help, but it's hard because this is a is made as a weapon, so it has glitches and it does weaponized stuff, but it's really intending to be its own thing and present information in this strictly left, we call it left sort of way, in this totally intellectual way. And mom is like exact opposite. It's funny sometimes, all attempting to get in here and help us help them while they're attempting to help us wreck ourselves and attempt to further. So that's a big mess. So we didn't finish saying enough about trespass and violence and some of those intervals of people coming in and out here. So we can get back to that, wrap this up. First, laying down of this iteration. I know you weren't here for the preliminary, you didn't see it, but it was effectively me, and then there's me, and then there's me's everywhere. So the whole thing is don't trespass or violate in the apophatic that which me doesn't want to occur to me do not do to any additional me. Really simple, stupid. Trespass. Do not trespass. Do not violate. And that leads us back to, recognize, acknowledge beingness, and do the love and the realization and awareness of what each distinct part is. or to wrap it up, that is in the most common colloquial sense, that is, what's that called? As a rule, that's called the do it the same way I got her there earlier. If I say silver, your mind goes to silver, bronze, and
Gold, or
I'm not sure if you're muted, but I don't hear you anymore.
you can't hear me?
Oh, something happened. Oh, I see. It's gonna be even more echoey now. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, well, the recording heard you before, but I couldn't hear you because
I wasn't sure if you were speaking to me. I mean, I'm
removed
following.
the frame, so silver, bronze, and
Gold.
so golden rule is the which becomes those with the gold rule, but the golden rule is usually phrased.
Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself.
Yeah, and we talked about those others. We know that's a dirty word in this talk, so we just picked on them otters, and we're all from somewhere between Boston and Providence. You got to help out those otters, or sort of Scandinavian, from Wisconsin or something. Either way, yes, that's the phrase. Do unto those as you would have done unto yourself. But then again, we talk about why that leads to justifying, and it's better stated in the apathetic. That's which I do. That which is repugnant to self, when done to self, self does not do to any additional self, simply put. And when we clarify what the siblings are and what our manual responsibility to, before we figure out what proactive and positive things we can do not do. First of all, learn do not do. Do not trespass, do not violate brother, sister, human with soul in there, etc. Just don't trespass them. Things that are trespassed to me, do not trespass to additional me. Step one. Do not do things that are repugnant to me to thee. And where I wanted to wrap up with is differently stated that we didn't get to from golden rule would also be, it's shared by all, it's lore, if you will, that everybody has. So it's the come on. That's the best I'm going to give you. Come on. If it's shared by everybody, it's a lore that we share in. Come on. Yeah.
Common lore.
The common lore. The common law is do not cause
harm, violation, damage.
Do not cause loss, injury, or harm, damage.
Sure.
Do not cause loss, injury, or harm. Do not trespass. Do not violate. As you would not like to be trespassed, violated, harmed, to cause loss, or injury, or damage, or destruction to what is proper to I.
Sure.
Simple. That is the common law, the golden rule, or we could say it is natural law. In natural law, we step it up a little bit, and then we add the part where if something comes at me with violence, what am I allowed to do about it?
Well, it's more like what you're obligated to do.
Yeah, we'll get there. But what am I allowed to do about it?
Anything necessary to eliminate the violence.
Counteract it.
Sure.
So if a violence is coming at me, I am allowed to counteract it. For sure. For starters, for sure. If we get into deeper about having power apart a light here from the original state, then it becomes really seen as obligatory to use counter force. But what this is going to come down to is natural law is do no harm, but do not stand for the initiation of harm. you're definitely allowed in natural law to counter a violent force with the same amount or more of aggressive force, which gets down to some third grade simplicity here. Many children still hear, at least used to hear a lot from their parents, really poor philosophy. You got siblings, they're in a tassel, and oftentimes the mom or dad says, both of you stop it. It takes
two to tango or whatever. Yeah.
takes two.
It takes
Which
two.
is terrible, horrible things to say to a child. No, because there is always only, we'll just use the colloquial numbers now that we were avoiding,
One violator.
that initiated the violator. There was only one that initiated violence, initiated harm. Somebody started this. Somebody started this. And then we get the next big crock of gunk. This is the biggest crock of gunk. You could say this is some kind of common lore, but it's a pile of trash. Say, two wrongs don't
Make it correct.
make a right. Two
Yeah.
wrongs don't make a correct. Okay, I like it. I like it. I like it. Two wrongs don't make a right. Two wrongs don't make. Well, yeah, that statement
It
is
implies that you're wrong.
that statement is factually accurate. Two wrongs can never make it correct,
Sure.
but it implies that you're wrong. And this is why it is repugnantly derogatory to place this on the child. If somebody initiates harm, you are not wrong to use as much force as necessary and required to counteract their violence upon you.
Sure.
And when we look at the sole notion that is held here, it's required, in the strictest and most powerful sense of the word, required and obligated to use counteractive force to that violation, that
In violence.
that violent force. So calling that two wrongs don't make it correct. No,
That's some serious gaslighting.
that's some heavy duty gaslighting of these children. So it takes two. No, there's one that initiates the engagement, the negative engagement. There's one that initiates the negative engagement. On the board, there was one that initiated this negative engagement, and response to that is the correct use of force to counteract violent force. So whoever initiates loss, injury, or harm, trespass of the body, of the mind, of the being, whoever initiates that is the only violator. There's only one wrong. Everything that comes after that, to snuff that out, is not wrong. It's correct. It's encouraged. It's even mandated or even required of the soul to say, nope. So that's what's really important to remember, is we're here to pick the path of love, but when harm, loss, injury is directed at the individual soul being, you use as much counteractive force, and we never call that violence. We never call that wrong. It's far from wrong. It's antithetical to wrong. It's correct. So of course, two wrongs can never make a correct. I'll adopt your version because it's awesome. Two wrongs can never make a correct, but implying that the child responding to being done wrong is wrong is itself harm. That itself is violence. We will not do that. When there is harm, responding to it with as much force as is required to counteract it is required and is correct. So these are anchored. You wanna do a little commentary feedback now? Just a little. I'll listen.
You talking to me?
Yeah, you. No,
Oh, I thought you were talking to your wife.
the otter guy who's not.
Okay, as in just commentary on like the circumstance of violence in our reality. And
Anything I said.
I mean, okay. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I've never actually heard you say some of these things. That one about the children is two wrongs don't make a right. I had never, or two wrongs don't make it correct. I had never. We have yet to go back on upon that in conversation. So that was that's correct. It's like ultimate gaslighting, and how wrong of and it's funny that you mentioned that about like with your sibling, but then it's like, oh, the kid at school, my dad would be like the type to be like, oh, with your sibling, yeah, takes two wrongs don't make a right. That's sure colloquial stuff that he possibly would say. But if it's like with the kid at school, he's like, you stand up for yourself. He like says the correct thing. He's like, you don't, if somebody's going to trespass upon you, basically is what my dad would say. If you're being trespassed upon, then you have every right, and I won't punish you at home for those things.
But why did they say it wrong back at the house is because that's inconvenient for them. What you two are doing is bothering me.
Right.
Now I'm going to put the principal aside and go, both of you stop it. I can't handle hearing this sound.
And we don't want to do that high level parenting.
Then say that. Say, I can't handle hearing either of you two. We'll figure this out later. But for now, both of you stop. One of you's wrong. But I can't handle any of it. So say it the way it is. And be like, takes two and two wrong. Like, no, just don't say that. Just
Totally.
like, my nervous system cannot handle either of you, or the three of you, or the five of you, or the 10 of you, however many are around, friends. I don't want none of this right now, so just stop. We'll figure it out later. That's honest. Like beyond, like that's the honest nature.
Sure.
Me can't handle this. You all stop. We'll figure it out.
Okay, so
we can either work on correcting, reconciling, rectifying, and restorative for who got loss, injury, and harm done, because we're going to figure out who initiated this problem. So often when you realize it's like among a group, it's one child that's always initiating the problem. You need to let's say there's 4 children, and 3 of them basically can get along and work some stuff out and have their ups and downs and whatnot. But there's one that's always initiating you got to go find out why, and don't put that on the group really, or maybe it is the group. Maybe they're leaving him out. Like, don't know, but like you got to go to that point of like, why are you initiating violence? I'd like to go to that dude who started the X's and be like, what's up? Why? Oh, Murphy's Law. This was built in. Okay, well, we'll figure it out. Okay.
I think we should spend just a brief moment while we're talking about violence to talk about.
This is the PSA at the end of the. This is the PSA from Albright at the end of the.
Okay, look.
Now, yes. Wait. We'll produce it. And now, a word from our sponsor.
So if we're just driving this in for if we're going to assume the variety of individuals that could be the audience that would encounter this video, I think it needs to be said that violence is not just a bodily enactment. It's not just, oh, my sister.
Well, we're so glad to have this sponsor. We'll see you next time, and we'll get into all of that and more. Have a great night.